Hello everybody, let's talk about Spring Boot. On this first episode I will teach you how to create the project, and in further episodes we'll be building our application step by step until we have a big server with containers. I will even include some cloud configuration that we can use locally on our machine, so you can learn from zero until you reach good knowledge, enterprise knowledge about the use of Spring Boot. So in this first episode, as I said, let's start with simple things, which is the create a project from zero. And the way to go is you just go to this website, Start Spring.io, and you will see this web page here. I will just remove this so you can understand how it appears here. And then now you can choose the configurations for your project. And it's more or less about your taste, if you are personally involved on this. If you are in enterprise, probably your architect or some guidelines in your company already said what you should use. So for the project, I will be using Maven as a dependency manager. If you don't know what is Maven and Gradle, there are good resources you can find on the internet. I will start with Maven because it's simpler, but if you already know Gradle or you like Gradle, you can go with Gradle. But I personally use Maven most of the times because it's simpler. Gradle sometimes can be tricky and complicated and very difficult to debug. But if you are used, for instance, to develop Android applications, maybe you are very comfortable using Gradle, please do. I recognize the value of the Gradle for big projects. As an architect, we use a lot of Gradle in some of applications, but when it's something personal and quick, personally, I prefer Maven. It's just an XML. If you don't know what Maven is, it's a dependency manager, and you will see in a moment an example where you can say, okay, my project depends on this, and we'll try to download the dependencies for your project. Of course, it's more than that. If you have tests, you can have plugins, generate reports for your project, and so on. But it's simpler. It's just an XML, and it's quite easy to understand. Gradle, it's more about code that can be in Kotlin, and Groovy can be more complicated if you don't know the syntax or even the configuration behind it, and the dependencies and the flow and the correct sequence when you define the projects and the statements. It can be tricky for a beginner. Okay, so I'm choosing Maven, I'm choosing Java. You can go with Kotlin. Spring Boot understands quite well the Kotlin, but I will use Java. It's more standard, it's easier to understand, and probably there will be more people interested in using Java than Kotlin. I've used Kotlin. It's very common on Android applications, even on server side. Sometimes Kotlin is used. Okay, I'm choosing this version. It's the more stable one, so it will be easier to find, for instance, documentation when you have troubleshoot. Sometimes people like the latest versions, but they forget that probably the documentation is not updated for them, so it will be difficult to find solutions for specific problems. And then we have the project metadata, like the group. It should be unique in the world. Consider it like a domain, like com. In this case, José de Cruz Learning Spring. I hope it will be unique in the world, meaning that if I need to, for instance, to publish this library to a central world server to be available for anyone in the world, I hope it should be unique. Otherwise there will be a conflict and it will not be possible to publish the project. Now this is a name for our project. I'm just calling it backend because it will be a backend server, or maybe I'll just change backend server. Why not? It's more clear. Okay, this is just a name and the description. These two are the most important, the group and the artifact, because they are technically unique. And for instance, some files that will be generated will take this name that we put here. These ones are more descriptive. Okay, package name, it's a package for Java where the main method will be included. And it's very important where the main method exists for Spring Boot, because it will try to discover and be intelligent about a few classes. And these classes called beans that have specific annotation. Usually, unless we say otherwise, it tries to find those classes from this package down. It means if we put a package on a class in this package, it will be invisible for Spring, unless we explicitly say that there are other classes in other package. Okay, we will be packaging as a jar, meaning that when you build, the result will be a jar, not a war, because we will be including automatically a web server like Tomcat in our application out of the box. It will not be necessary to have a web server in our machine. the Spring Boot already includes a web server if you want, and it'll be Java 17. Why not? We could use 23, but probably most people already have this installed. I will not, and I'm trying to minimize as possible for you to change the configuration of your machine. So at this time, the only thing that you need on your machine is a JDK 17, nothing more. Even Maven, it's already included on the project that will be generated by this wizard. Okay, now we need a dependency. If you want, usually when we start a Spring Boot application, we don't need any specific dependency, but the project will be just a simple Java application. But if you want at least to have an REST API or something, as a web server, a Tomcat, we should go to the dependencies. We have a lot of them, all of them grouped by a theme like developer tools, web, template engines, security related SQL when you access databases, NoSQL databases, messaging. There are a lot of subjects under the Spring. We just need one at this time, which will be Spring Web. And Spring Web allows us to build web, including RESTful. So we have APIs out the box. Spring MVC, if you want web pages, we will have web pages also. And it includes Apache Tomcat as the defaulted embed container, which means that we have the possibility to have a web server, develop web page and API. It's almost a complete server. Of course, we don't have here yet access to a database, but for REST it's already included. So we click it and you can see that it's headed to this right part of the right side of the web. Now let's explore what will be generated. That's why I like this web page. When we click this explore, you can see this will be the structure created in a zip file when we click the generate for this project. And this is the Maven. So you can see that we have here the parent, which means that we are using our Spring Framework boot. Started parent, it's I will not explain into detail at this time, maybe later when we add other dependencies, but let's say that it's just a base where the configuration is explicitly written here, and there are a lot of things already here on these packages. And when we add our dependency, and you can see in the Maven here the dependencies, and we can see this, the dependency, that the one that we choose for web, org Spring Framework boot, and you can see that you have a Spring Boot, and you have this thing called starters. Starters, it's a dependency in Spring that, let's say, imagine that when we add the web, you saw that we have REST APIs, web server pages, and a Tomcat. In a common application, probably we will need at least 3 dependencies. But when we write started here, the Spring Boot already included all these dependencies in this starter, and it call it web because they are a set of packages, a set of dependencies that Spring Boot understands that should be together, and it call it web. And the same apply for other starters like security and access to database and things like that. All of them, they always have this starter, and the starter means, okay, for you to start this project, you will need at least this thing. So for you to start a web project, you will need a Tomcat, you will need for server page, and you will need a REST API. So you just write the starter, and I will include everything that you need. The version, that's the magic here. We don't have to explicitly say what is the version because it will be this one. Okay, and it means that if we add other dependencies here, the version will be the same unless we say that it's a different version and everything is in sync. So we expect for everything to work, and that this is one of the reasons why Spring Boot is so popular. Okay, and by default usually adds the Spring test because testing belongs to the good practice of the project. And we have here a Spring Boot Maven plugin that will be very useful and can do a lot of things behind the scenes when we need it. So I will close this. So this is the basic configuration for our applications, and now we'll generate a zip file. So when I click here, you can see that this is saying, okay, where do you want to download this file? And this file, it's a zip. You can see it's backend server, which is the name that we put it here, zip, and inside it's the structure of the project that we saw here. And maybe I want to return to it just to show you a few things. When you choose Maven, you can see here this package Maven already has configurations to download the Maven. So you don't need to install Maven on your machine. The only thing, as I said before, that you will need is just the JDK 17, because it's the one that we choose. Everything else, it's already included in the project. And it's really simple, just the Maven, and we have the source here, and you can see in the source that we have the structure, the common set with the source, main, the com, and the packages, and the package that we created, and the structure for the tests. And we'll have these application properties, which is a properties file that we explore a lot in further videos, but at this time it only has one property, which is the name of our application. So this is the name that Spring Boot understands as the identifier of our application. Usually when it's a single application, it's important to have this name, but it doesn't have a big impact. But you, for instance, are building several Spring Boot applications, for instance, in a microservice architecture. These names for configuration management, for load balancing, things like that, are really, really important. Okay, so let's close again, and I can try to generate again. And he asked, okay, do you really want to save it? So we say save. So please do this step by step, save it, and put in a folder that you think, the folder where do you want to work, and it's the folder that you will use for IntelliJ or Eclipse or any other idea that tastes you better. Maybe it's Visual Studio Code. I know people that really love Visual Studio Code, so you can use it also for these projects. And I think there are good plugins for Spring Boot and Java on Visual Studio Code. But IntelliJ is a great option. Eclipse, it works quite well. And Visual Studio Code, it should work also. It's not important. I will not use any specific feature of an EDA. I'll talk in my videos, I will use IntelliJ, but it work. But I will never be using any specific configuration of the. I will just use Java files, open files, and execute. And most of the time, I will be using the command line to execute applications. So just choose an EDA that tastes you better, and just use it. There will be no. It will not be important for the videos that I will do in the future regarding the Spring Boot. So I hope to see you in my next video, and in that video I will be creating our first REST application and our first REST API. Thank you.